The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association, connecting Virginians to their government. And a very warm welcome to Delegate Ken Plum from Northern Virginia. Good to see you.
Woody, thank you for having me back, and thanks to the Cable Television Association for providing the service.
Well, thank you for being here, sir. We know how busy you are.
Yeah.
You know, the new governor has been doing pretty well. Tell us a little bit about his agenda and how that agenda has been received.
Woody, I'm extremely positive about our new governor. He is a highly energetic man. He's been about the state government. Many state employees are surprised to realize when he walks into their offices. The other day he appeared in the General Assembly building unannounced. He's out and about getting his arms around state government and getting acquainted with the people who serve us in state government. Oftentimes state employees are not appreciated nearly enough, and he's carrying the message about the importance of state government and the work that they do. The governor has an energetic plan in terms of trying to move Virginia forward. He wants to get more Virginians back in the workforce. He wants Virginians to make better money. He wants to grow our economy. He has numerous contacts from his years of service at the national level that stand him in good stead, not only nationally but internationally. So he's going to be a great ambassador for Virginia. I think you're going to see significant economic growth while he's here. And while, of course, he has a divided House of Delegates to work with, he is a tremendously friendly guy. He's going to insist on working with Republicans, whether they want to work with him or not. He's not about partisanship. He's about getting the job done. He's extended the arm of friendship to every Republican individually. He's indicated a willingness to work with them. He's assembled a marvelous staff of people in his cabinet and in his executive office. I think I'm very positive about what's going to happen and how we're going to move forward.
And he's gotten high marks from everyone in terms of his cabinet appointments. There are 3 holdovers from the McDonnell administration. Sure. But I know that education is a real significant issue for you and your constituents. Yeah. Talk to us about the new Secretary of Education, Ann Holton.
Sure. Well, Woody, I think it's appropriate to recognize that the cabinet ought to be made up of people who can do the best job. And the new governor recognized that, and he, for example, kept on Secretary Brown, who's been in charge now of our state budget for decades, to continue on to have the stability in the state budget and state government that he provides. But also, too, he's recognized that we need some new looks at how we do some business in government, and he brought on Ann Holton, who is the wife of our Senator, Tim Kaine, former Governor Tim Kaine, and daughter of former Governor Linwood Holton, who herself was part of desegregating the schools in Richmond, Virginia, and has a long history of in Virginia and in public education. She brings a marvelous vision from her work as a juvenile court judge to recognize that there are a number of youth who need special consideration in our schools. And the governor made it clear that he reached out to her because he was aware that she had worked with people on the margins, the people who needed special help, and we want to make sure that those people are accommodated in our schools and that they're successful. So she brings a fresh, broad look perspective. She's well aware of the significance of our community college system and the importance of community college in preparing people for the workplace. She's going to, I think, be a real strong leader. I look forward to working with her.
And I believe in the governor's second day in office, he issued an executive order dealing with ethics reform, and I know that's an issue before the General Assembly this year.
Very much so, and I might just say, too, that on his first day in office, his very first action was to issue an executive order saying that we're not in state employment going to be discriminating against people, among other things, based on their sexual orientation. That was a an important step to make, it's an important statement to make, to say that we are going to get past these old notions in Virginia, these old taboos, and we're going to recognize that people have rights regardless of who it is they love, and that they can be good state employees and move forward, and we need to take that attitude forward. It's unfortunate, but in state government, we've had the circumstance with our last governor where he's now indicted, along with his wife, on a number of charges that are ethical in nature. And Governor McAuliffe then, as candidate McAuliffe, said that he would be issuing an executive order, which he's now done, that essentially takes away the ability of any of his appointees and any of the people serving him from receiving gifts, and that's appropriate. We shouldn't be in the business of taking gifts. It raises all kinds of questions about who you're serving, and of course you need to serve the bigger public, not particular people who have an interest or who might have money and that sort of thing. So he's made a strong statement on the executive level, and now it's incumbent upon us in the legislature to recognize that while we've relied on disclosure in the past to say that you can receive gifts, you can receive trips or whatever it might be, as long as you disclose to the public. And the view being that some of these things are not inappropriate. They might, in fact, be helpful to your service in the office, but the disclosure of them would have the voter know what it is, who it is that you're serving, and who it is that you're receiving information from. But the past governor used all the loopholes in the current laws to get around disclosing what he was doing and he and his wife and family were doing, and that showed up a need to rewrite the law. I participated in a bipartisan panel before this session to start getting together the ideas and information that we needed to make sure that we tighten up our laws and that we keep the public trust by having them know that we are serving the people of the Commonwealth, not some special moneyed interest. You're going to see significant bills come out of the legislature this time. There are a bipartisan group working now in the Courts of Justice Committee in the House. There's a similar group meeting in the Senate, and I think we're going to see some tough legislation that not only strengthens our disclosure, broadens our disclosure to include family and friends, but also then puts some teeth into the actions that can be taken if you don't follow those ethical rules.
Now, what about the creation of a commission to provide guidance, advice, and counsel to members of the General Assembly regarding whatever regime is adopted?
Yeah, I think that's really very critical. What you get into once you start talking about how this system works, you recognize that there are a lot of details and so on that you're never going to be able to quite write out in law. And what the federal Congress has done, and most states who've undertaken this have done, is to set up an independent commission that provides advice to members about whether or not, for example, an invitation to go to see whatever it is that you're invited to see as part of an educational effort could in fact be valuable to you as a legislator and appropriate that you accept. We can't personally afford to go to all those places and so on, when it would be appropriate for you to accept it and when it would not be appropriate. And so that kind of independent verification, if you will, would be an important part of how an ethics rule would be implemented. I would say that, again, that's done in the Congress and it's done in many states, and I think it's an added feature that we haven't had in the past, but necessary to get a workable bill.
Now, turning your attention to a debate that occurred just yesterday in the state Senate,
yeah.
The Democrats were able to take control because the lieutenant governor is now a Democrat and is able to cast the tie vote. It's now 20-20 there.
Right. And what do you know, it's fact of life that in this political game, it's about power. It's about who has the votes in order to get action done. I'd like to think that we could sit down and work together and not have these issues come up. But there comes a time when a division is made and decisions have to be made, and the Senate found itself, because of the election of the Attorney General, who was a senator, and the election of the Lieutenant Governor, who was a senator, having two vacancies. When those vacancies were filled, it was filled by two Democrats. That left the Senate, as you indicated, 20-20, but now with the deciding vote being a Democratic Lieutenant Governor. The Senate then, with the new leadership and the new majority, went about rewriting its rules, reappointing its committee members, and setting its committee chairs. No surprise that 2 years ago, when the same circumstance existed, 2020, with a Republican lieutenant governor, the committee chairs all turned out to be Republicans. The committees all turned out to be controlled by Republicans. And now, 2 years later, with a lieutenant governor being a Democrat, it turns out that all the committee chairs are Democrats and all the committees are controlled by Democrats. No great surprise there. What I hope we'll do is to get over that and recognize that so many of the issues we face aren't clearly Democratic or Republican. They're issues that involve the people of the Commonwealth, and we get past the partisanship of it and get the work of the Senate done. From my perspective in the House, it's really very important, though, that Democrats have a say in the Senate. Some terrible legislation gets out of the House, legislation that I find personally embarrassing, legislation I vote against, but being one of 33 of 100 members in the House, Democrats are not able to control some of the more conservative, anti-woman, anti-abortion kind of bills that people read about and know about from late-night comedy television past the House of Delegates. Well, the Senate now can effectively kill those off. And, of course, the other feature that we have now is the governor would be able to veto those as well. And the veto of the governor now could be maintained because it would not be possible to override the veto in the Senate. So hopefully that's all past us now and we can get on with the work of the House. It's particularly significant now as we try to fashion a budget that we have a strong voice in the Senate that we will have with the Democratic control to make a budget that's responsive to the people's needs in Virginia.
And of course, one of the more contentious issues this session is the expansion of Medicaid. The U.S. Supreme Court, when it upheld the Affordable Care Act last year, left to the states the discretion to determine the expansion of Medicaid. The governor has made that an initiative this year. He's even asked the General Assembly to give him authority in spite of the existence of the Medicaid Reform Commission to make that decision. So tell us how that's going in the House and what's likely to happen from your perspective.
Well, it's disappointing in the House, Woody. The Republicans, and again, I'm sorry to make it a partisan issue, but it is divided on partisan lines, have insisted that they are not going to go forward with Medicaid expansion this year. What makes that so difficult to understand is that we leave on the table $5 million every day.
Every day.
Every day. $5 million that are paid by Virginia taxpayers into the federal system that we could get back when we have 1 million uninsured Virginians. Medicaid expansion could possibly serve as many as 400,000 of those uninsured Virginians. Why wouldn't we do that? Well, some will say, gee whiz, you can't count on the federal government in the future. And I would say, in the future when that occurs, we deal with that. Right now we have a situation of where 100% of the cost of Medicaid expansion would be paid by monies that are paid by Virginians that are going to Washington, D.C., that's going to go to some other state to serve other people when we have Virginians who can't get their prescriptions filled, they can't afford to get their prescriptions filled, they don't go to preventative health because they can't afford to, and they end up in the emergency room and not able to pay the bill. That adds to the health cost of all of us. Medicaid expansion is not just a matter for people who don't have insurance. It's a matter of the health care cost of all of us, because those people without insurance do resort to the emergency room, do use the highest cost medical service, do cost more because they don't have regular medical attention, and all that inflates the cost of health care, and we pay for that. And so as a consequence, it would be my hope that reason will eventually prevail. Recently, the Department of Medical Assistance Services did a study about what would the effect of expanding Medicaid be on health care costs in Virginia. And the answer is, it would, in addition to expanding Medicaid to bring us $5 million a day, it would save us $1 billion. And it saves us $1 billion by bringing people into an insurance program where they can, in the insurance program, have early diagnosis of conditions, develop a preventative care kind of program, and keep themselves healthier, and as a consequence not get into such chronic conditions and needing the emergency room so much. That results in savings for you. It makes for families that are healthier, kids that can do better when they go to school, less cost on society. And why we are debating this, so much rhetoric recently on the House floor that I find extremely disappointing has revolved around an opposition to what is called Obamacare. Well, Obamacare is a catchword to say I don't like the president, so I don't like this program. Well, I'm sorry. The president's been overwhelmingly elected twice. The public is in favor of Affordable Care Act. When you call them the Affordable Care Act, they like it. Some of them, when you say it's Obamacare, they say they don't like it. But it's all one and the same. And the benefit of it flows not to President Obama, not to Washington, D.C. It flows to Virginia's citizens who are paying into this system, and we need to get past this ideological barrier now that stands in the way of us making good judgment. The business community in the past has been pretty supportive of the notion that we ought to expand Medicaid, and they really need to put their shoulders to the wheel to move along Republicans on doing this. Hospitals in Virginia, one hospital is already closed.
Lee Hospital.
Lee Hospital in Southwest Virginia is already closed. Other hospitals are on the chopping block because they can't meet the needs of people who need medical care but can't pay the bill. As a humane society, it's necessary for us to take action. And so I think it is the paramount importance that when the legislature adjourns this year, that we adjourn with expanded Medicaid service for the people in Virginia who need it and who are paying for it.
Now, is it more likely than not now that you will see something out of the Senate in terms of Medicaid expansion that you won't see out of the House?
It's likely that the ultimate outcome of this will probably be in a conference committee surrounding the budget, because obviously it has broad budgetary implications. The House Republicans have most recently said that they would like an audit of the Medicaid program. Fine, let's do another audit. But as the Secretary of Health and Human Services will tell you, it'll be an audit of audits. We've audited so much. The previous administration took great pleasure in pointing out how many times that they had stopped Medicaid abuse and so on and fraud. And we have a clean system in Virginia, what many people consider one of the cleanest in the country. We're past those points now, so let's figure out a system. And if you want to give it a different name than Affordable Care Act, if you want to give it a different name than Expanded Medicaid, if you want to make it the Virginia Plan for insuring its citizens, whatever we want to do, too many people are depending upon us, and too many people don't have the wherewithal themselves to be able to make these decisions, and it's to our societal advantage. We all gain when the society is healthier.
Now, another related issue that is bipartisan in nature is the reform of our mental health system as a result of a tragedy suffered by one of your colleagues on the Senate side.
Sure.
Of course, we had Virginia Tech some years ago, and that issue has been on the table, but there's legislation pending now because of the tragedy.
Yeah, and it's too bad that it takes tragic situations in our own family to bring our attention to this. With Virginia Tech, we realized that we did not have adequate facilities to follow up on those who need mental health services. And after Virginia Tech, we put $50 million additional in the budget to provide those services. But in the succeeding years with the recession, we took $40 million of that back out of the budget. That left us with a tragic situation of where we know about the Deeds family, but I can tell you there are families across Virginia who live in fear because it turns out that one of their family members happens to be mentally ill and violently mentally ill. Not everybody who's mentally ill, of course, is violent. By no means is that the case. But it is the case in some situations where people need appropriate medication, need appropriate intervention, and we've got to make sure those services are available there when people need them. We need to tweak the law as it relates to how we are able to detain people who are a harm to themselves or could be a harm to others. We're working on tweaking those bills. Senator Deeds' personal experience gives us some real insight as to how it is that maybe we need to be able to hold people for a bit longer to make sure that they are safe to themselves and safe for others. at the same time recognizing the civil liberties of people who are mentally ill. All those things have to be balanced. But in the end, we need also to make sure that crisis intervention centers are available around the Commonwealth so that when people are in crisis, when they are delusional, when they are hearing voices, when they are seeing people, when they're paranoid about people around them, there's a place to go that can provide the proper intervention, the proper medication, the proper treatment to get them back into as a living member of society, and without all these tragic consequences that come when we don't do that.
And unfortunately, we have a lot of returning veterans from theaters of war who suffer from those maladies as well.
Oh, you know, the tragedies that occur there are just too bad, and it's too bad that our federal government with this veterans program has not really been adequate in meeting the needs there, and it adds a whole nother level of need that we need to respond to for sure.
Now, a related issue regards the developmentally disabled and the settlement that was entered into about a year or two ago with the Department of Justice that will over time potentially require the closing of some of the training centers.
Right.
Talk to us about that issue.
Yeah, it's a big issue for Northern Virginia. It's a big issue for my constituents. I have some constituents who have adult children living in Northern Virginia Training Center. And while I agree with the overall purpose of having people who are disabled serve and live out their lives in the least restrictive environment, I agree with that goal. I do not think, however, it is a smart action to take someone who has lived in, for example, the training center environment, which is very much a home kind of environment, for 40 and 50 years, to suddenly dislocate them into some place, sometimes hours away from their support family, and do that. Over a period of time, it may be possible to close out or reduce the size of those facilities, but we have to do it in a very humane way. The parents of those children are now in their 70s and 80s. The children are in their 40s and 50s. We've got to have a transitional program that recognizes that these folks need to live out their life in the supporting environment that they've had, and at the same time continue our development of community-based facilities, which are doing miraculous things. They are doing miraculous things of taking people who have severe disabilities and making them, in fact, citizens with productive lives, working and living in group homes and so on. We want to make sure that continues for sure. But right now, we can't talk about closing the training centers because really there's no place to move those folks who are there who need the kind of supportive services that they have. So it's a transitional time for us. It's a painful time for us, but we've got to be more considerate of families who have children there, to not make artificial deadlines, to not make unrealistic deadlines, but rather work with them in a deliberate kind of way to make the transition over a period of time and recognize that the future is a whole different thing. But right now we've got some people in the middle that we've got to look out for.
Now, comparatively speaking, Virginia has a low rate of unemployment, but there are still a lot of people, even though they are employed, who don't feel like they make a living wage, and I know you have a great interest in that issue as well.
Yeah, Woody, it is the case that what's happened over the past decade is that people in the lowest of incomes have gained in income about 3%. People in the highest percentage of incomes have seen rates of 50% increase. The divide between the people who have and the people who do not have is widened. To be poor today is to be much poorer than you would have been in the past because everybody else around you is doing so well. That forces up cost around you, cost of living, cost of food, cost of clothing, and everything else. I really think that we've got to do something to intervene to make sure that the people who don't have an opportunity to be successful. And one of the most obvious things is the minimum wage, which we haven't raised in a decade. To suggest to people that you can get paid for $7 a quarter to be able to live in Northern Virginia, that would be a joke. It's just simply not possible to do that. Everybody likes the low-cost fast food that they're able to pick up, but we can't do that at other people's expense. What happens when we raise the minimum wage, and I propose that we raise the minimum wage in Virginia, and of course the President's proposing that we raise it nationally, and I hope he's successful. We would then be part of the national movement to raise the minimum wage, is to put money in the pockets of people who themselves become consumers. These aren't people who are going to take the money and hoard it away. These are people who need the money to pay their prescriptions, to buy their groceries, to buy their gas, and that goes back in the economy. It helps to, if you will, jumpstart the economy that's been sluggish from the Great Recession all along. It does not help any of us to have a lower class or an underclass not able to support themselves. And so I think a very reasonable way to do that would be to raise the minimum wage. I've also proposed that in Virginia we have a number of tax credits that we give to businesses and that we give to individuals. And in the case of businesses, for example, if you're using agricultural best management practices, or if you're in the film industry, or if you're in the coal industry, if you do not use up all your tax credit, believe it or not, but we write you a check. We give you back the value of your tax credit. Now, if you're very poor, you can, in the federal system, get an earned income tax credit. And you can use that credit to reduce your tax liability. But if there's credit left over after you reduce your tax liability, we don't give you any of it. Now, there are 20 states that do. There are 20 states that refund you a portion of your tax credit. I think that's something we ought to do in Virginia. We may not be able to afford to do a whole 100% refund, but we should do at least a partial refund to once again put money in the pockets of consumers who will spend that money to jumpstart our economy and will be able to help reduce the cost of social services, because when people can pay for services themselves, they don't need government. And you can, with raising the income tax, with raising the minimum wage and with the earned income tax credit, you can in fact help people stand on their own 2 feet and become productive citizens of themselves.
Got about a minute left.
Yeah.
And I know we wanted to discuss a little bit about the repeal of the hybrid tax, the $64 annual tax on hybrid vehicles.
Yeah, good news, Restonians. We who drive Prius cars, and I have 2 Priuses, and a lot of my neighbors have them as well. That ornery Prius hybrid tax that was put on last year as part of the transportation package, all of us who held our nose and voted for that package because it was so important for transportation in our region, said we would come back and we would work on repeal of the tax. The repeal is going forward. I believe that it will pass both houses. The governor will sign it, and we'll get rid of that tax. Didn't make any sense to encourage people on the one hand to buy energy-efficient vehicles and then penalize them on the other hand.
Great. We didn't get to a host of the education issues, but we certainly appreciate your work, especially on SOL reforms and other initiatives that are pending now.
It's going to happen.
Great.
SOL reforms happen.
Great. Good to see you, Delegate Ken Plum.
Thank you,
Keep up the good work.
Appreciate being with you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.